Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Datsun Build. So a few episodes ago, I was patching rust holes in the floor of the Datsun with the flux core welder that I bought. That welder was like $100 on Amazon, and it worked good for patching like heavy metal kind of stuff, but it worked awfully for doing anything on sheet metal. It would just burn holes right through the metal. It was essentially just working way too hot. I got a lot of recommendations from you guys to get a MIG welder that runs with gas. For those of you who don't know about welders, welders need shielding gas. Flux core welders, the shielding gas is in the wire. In MIG welders, the shielding gas is sprayed at the welding site via a tank of gas that you have connected to the welder. So I picked up a MIG welder. I got one used. I got a Lincoln Electric 140 HD. It works fantastic. It runs with gas, and I have some 2575 CO2 argon shielding gas. So in this episode, we're gonna be going over those patches that I did, and we're gonna be redoing them because they weren't welded properly. Also, if you didn't check the last episode, I made a pushover jig, which is why the car is on its side. So here's one of the patches that I did. You can see how the welds just really didn't go through. Anywhere there's a solid line, you know, the metal was not fused properly. Here, I mean, it's all over. And I was burning holes, so there's holes all throughout it as well. And nothing about this is airtight. So this is awful. This one had some more solid welding to it, but there were still lines, lots of unfused metal, lots of holes, and in general, they all need to be redone. Now, before we get into patching all of that, let me show you some of the practicing that I've been doing. So as many of you guys know, this is my old WRX fender. I used metal from it to patch those patches. Now, I've been using this as my test subject, and yeah, it looks like some, steampunk fender, but this will never go back in a car in its life. This is gonna go to the junkyard eventually. So this is where I was starting with the flux core welder. A few weeks ago, I was trying to learn how to weld sheet metal. And you can see it's pretty crappily done. A lot of the welds are just kind of sitting on top of the metal. There's not good bonding between the two, lots of holes. And so now this is where we started with the MIG welder that I got the other day. Still looks pretty awful. I had a lot of bubbling. I was blowing holes everywhere. I was actually really disappointed. I thought, maybe I'm just really bad at welding and this just isn't for me. And so then I Googled it. I researched, what was wrong with the welder? Why was I making bubbles and burning holes through all the metal? And a few forums said that there wasn't gas flowing to the nozzle. So I did my research and I found the proper nozzle for my welder. And then these were the results. This is after I replaced the nozzle. This was before, after. So much better. This was before the gas, and this is where I figured the gas problem out. And these welds were actually going through all the way. Great bonding between the metal. Little smiley face, kind of messed up smiley face. My final trial was welding this piece that I chopped off. I completely cut it off and I welded it back on. And I think I'm finally ready to weld on the Datsun again. And a little comparison, this is my final test, and this is what we were dealing with in the last episodes. Very blobby. So let's start from this side. I'm gonna cut out the patches and start moving around the entire car and weld them all in.
I could do anything if I just put my mind to it.
Well, now that you're a little bit older, I can tell you that's a crock. No matter how good you are at something, there's always about 1,000,000 people better than you.
Gotcha. Can't win, don't try.
All right, now we have the holes cut, edges are cleaned up, we have the metal cleaned up. We're now gonna use some aviation snips, get the metal to a perfect fit, and we will start welding it in.
Gotcha. Can't win, don't try.
Now we have all of this ready. It is time to weld. This is the welder that I got. Harbor Freight welding cart, tiny gas, the tiniest of gas. Everyone knows size doesn't matter, but when picking out a shielding gas, pick out a bigger canister than I did. 20 cubic inches is not a lot, and I've ran through half of this thing in like an hour of welding. Buy a bigger tank. Now these two are done. They are definitely a lot more solid than the old ones. Still a little bit ugly, but they have much better penetration. All right, on to the rest. Now we have 4 patches done. So these 2 turned out pretty good. In a few spots, this was just a massive hole that I had to patch. But in general, they're going on pretty nicely. I know this doesn't look like your conventional welds, but again, it's sheet metal, so you kind of just have to like slowly go throughout it, or else you're gonna burn holes or warp the metal. But in general, these are looking so much better. I also feel so much less self-conscious about these. Like the welds I was doing before were just, they were nasty. Kind of killed my confidence with welding, but this is kind of bringing all that back. I feel very confident that I will get better at welding. I've even progressed along just these 4. Like the first one was not so great, and the last one, like I kind of have a little bit of a technique down. I thought I had a technique down on the Subaru fender when I was practicing, but I think that didn't work as well when the metal was slightly different, because the thickness of the Datsun floors and the thickness of the Subaru sheet metal is probably slightly different, which is causing like slightly different welding environments versus when I was practicing. The next thing we're gonna be doing is fixing this lap weld. I really don't know what I was thinking with this. I feel like I've come a long way since doing this lap weld. So usually these episodes are filmed over the course of a couple days, and I'm gonna leave these welds overnight right now, but I don't wanna leave them bare. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wipe them down with acetone and then spray a little bit of a primer on them so they don't flash rust on me. Everything's dried up next day, so we're gonna get back to this. We're going to focus on this crappy lap weld. We're gonna chop it up all the way around here. This is part of the unibody, so this can't come out. We'll go inside the car and chop it out here. And then down here, we'll do the same thing as above and just chop a little bit bigger out than the weld. I have some primer drying on the other side. So we're gonna let that dry, and while that's drying, we will go down here and chop this one out. And then there's actually some that I missed. There's like tiny little holes throughout all of this. So we're just gonna do a big piece from here all the way over to here. This is definitely the best weld I've ever done. Look how pretty it is. The most impressive weld I've ever done. And to give you guys a shot of like this was a hole I had to fill. So that's why it's kind of like thick there. But in general, this was awesome. Let's finish this once and for all. So since I cut the metal out for this piece in 3 different pieces, I can't just line those pieces up on the fender and make a perfect cut. So I'm gonna do a method that I saw online with duct tape. I'll show you that now. So this is the piece that we cut out of the duct tape. We're gonna take this and we're gonna tape it onto the fender and then just cut it out. So I just cut this piece of metal out, and I realized that I cut the bend opposite to where the bend is supposed to be. So it's supposed to be like this, so it, you know, because the floor bends right here, and I did it backwards. So we're gonna bash this flat.
Let that be a lesson to you, sweetie. Never love anything.
Even you?
So basically, for all these pieces that I have to cut out, I end up having to trim a lot of the metal off on the sides to make it fit perfectly. This one, where I use the duct tape method, I didn't have to trim anything. It literally just fits perfectly in the slot. And we'll just put it in. You shall see. So there still is a few gaps here and here, but in general, it fits a lot better and I didn't have to trim anything. So if any of you are trimming sheet metal to plug rusted holes in your floorboards, try the duct tape method. It works really well. And that's it. It's done. So that one ended up being a bit tricky, but it's all welded up. It's sealed. The floor of the car looks interesting. It's like an art piece. So that is it for this episode. I'm sorry that this was the same episode as it was like a few episodes ago, except for the fact that the car's on its side right now. I didn't initially plan on doing the floors twice, but I'm glad I did. I learned a lot from redoing all this. In the next episode, we are most likely clearing off the rust and undercoating from the bottom of the car and replacing it with new undercoating. So stay tuned for that. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.